If you are an educator, a trainer, a facilitator, someone who is sharing and presenting information and you want people to remember it, right? They're not going to remember 100% of it. This video is designed to increase the percentage that people do actually remember. And kind of cool enough, I've got this lovely group of humans that are a part of this Engage to Educate workshop series that I have been leading, and invited them to be a part of this experience. So I'm going to just facilitate a bit of an exercise intended to demonstrate how we can design our content for contribution and also unpack a whole list of 7 characteristics or ideas that make something really memorable. And some of this content is pulled from my absolute favorite book called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. All right. Everybody in Engage to Educate, give a wave and an off mute hello.
Hello.
All right.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So as a way of making this concept concrete, of designing content for contribution, a quick little versus stories. So when an instructor, let's say a chemistry professor, goes to design a course, he or she is probably going to take a textbook and divide it by 15 weeks in a semester, and that's going to be the syllabus. And it's like, oh, that is designed for like material, not for people. And so take a complete opposite spectrum of that. I met a chemistry teacher who taught middle school and high school chemistry for 35 years and retired. His name is Alfred Poor. And he told me that in the beginning, the first class of every single year as he taught students, he taught nothing on the first class, and he did a 45-minute question storm. And what he did is he said, students, what I want you to do is think about what you're curious about related to the natural world, and it can be related to somebody else's question, and you can kind of riff off each other as we go. But I'm going to invite you to simply ask questions for 45 minutes. All right? I'll get us started. Why is fire hot? And so let's do this right now, just as a quick play, just off mute. Think about like things about the natural world that you're naturally curious about, and popcorn out a couple questions. Let's go Avril, then Dennis, then Paul, then Danette.
Why is the sky blue?
Why does water swirl in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere as that of the northern hemisphere?
Why do people become worse drivers in lightly bad weather? Light rain, light snow, whatever.
Oh my goodness. I was thinking, why do snakes exist in the natural world?
If we were in Alfred's chemistry class, this would go on for 45 minutes. And in middle school or high schoolers, he'd be pushing them to be a little bit crazy in their curiosity. And after 45 minutes, he'd look at them and he would say, thank you. You've just planned our curriculum for the rest of the year. And what he did is he would be furiously scribbling down as many questions as he could, and he'd weave their questions into the concepts that he was teaching throughout the year. Now, that's probably an unrealistic exercise to do for most pieces of content, but the idea here is the focus was so much on personalizing and designing learning, and so he started by inviting their curiosity and contribution right away. So what I want to do, usually if I was going to facilitate connection before content like I'm about to, I would split us up into breakouts. But as a group, we've been together for a while. And so I'm going to hold up a question in a minute, give you 5 seconds to think of your response, and invite you to just popcorn out a response off mute. Now, the question is a big one. So remember that you have 100% autonomy and choice in how you answer this question. And as much as possible, everybody who's listening to somebody else's response, try to remember what their responses were, because they're going to be relevant in a minute. All right? Also, as I hold up this question, I'm going to invite a level 2 response. And what I mean by that is, what is a moment in time you will never forget? If you're a parent, it would be very easy to say the birth of your child. If you've been married recently, it'd be very easy to say your wedding day, right? It's some like momentous moment. But also there's tons of other memories that don't fit into like classic big memory categories. And so that's a level 2 response. So inviting you to choose a level 2 response that doesn't fit in one of those big categories. That is a moment in time you will never forget. I'll give you 5 seconds to think, and then hop off mute when you're ready to share, and I'll call out an order of names. Naya, then Lisa, then Danette.
All right. Mine is the day that I started my business, day number 38 this year, because I make a video every day. So day 38.
I think I was second. Mine is on more of a personal note, and I remember it because I told myself I will remember this moment. I will never forget this moment. And it was a time when I was skiing fresh powder in the backcountry under the full moonlight. It was amazing.
And mine was my first ever presentation where I totally sucked, but I loved it.
I love it. So that's first of all, can you just raise a hand if you connected with something that was just said? Some connection in some way. You don't have to answer yes just because you're being recorded. Cool. So this is one of the values of, I don't often invite everybody to share in a larger group because it takes a lot of time. But one major benefit is when one person speaks, it may highlight or ignite, spark 10 connections in a room. And so it's a way to create connection at scale. Ideally, though, once a group actually knows each other. So at a baseline, this idea of connection before content, really useful to prime our brains and get us ready to remember stuff because we need our prefrontal cortex to be present. We're like, what are we going to share? What am I going to do, etc. What I'm going to do now is share a bunch of blanks. If you read the book Made to Stick, you would recognize this acronym. And so if you have read the book, hold off for just a minute. I'm going to ask you, so this list is essentially the answer to why do we remember some things and not others? So why do we remember a Super Bowl commercial from 10 years ago, but not the one that played right after it, right? Same brain, same context, same age, same temperature, but there was something about the content specifically that was memorable. And so a few of you just shared a moment in time that you'll never forget. And I'm wondering if everybody else can just popcorn off a couple things couple characteristics that they feel like are memorable. And I will reveal the boxes. If you guess one, I'll reveal one of these purple boxes to see if you get the characteristic right. There's probably, in real life, there's probably more than 7. So you might say something that's not in a purple box, and that's fine for the purposes of the video. So take a second, think about why do we remember some things and not others? Condense that down into a word or two. You'll increase your chances of revealing a purple box if it begins with S, U, C, E, or S. And go ahead and off-mute popcorn them out. I'm going to get my eraser ready.
Unusual.
Unusual. I think that counts. I think they could have subbed it out. Unexpected was Chip and Dan Heath's language for that. Unexpected.
Emotional.
Aha, yes. I gave a presentation and I sucked, but I loved it. Right? You hear that? What else?
Something about transformative. So I'm thinking change making or something.
Nice try.
Connected to something you experienced.
Connected to something
To
you
your
experienced.
past.
I'm gonna reveal this one for that. Stories. It's got some story element to it.
Consequential?
Consequential. Ooh, let me think about. Can you say more about that?
Well, there's some sort of consequence. It doesn't have to be a bad consequence, but a positive or negative. Something happened as a result of that thing.
Yeah, interesting. There's some benefit. That would make sense because our brains, if that was true, our brains wouldn't store useless facts because there was like no consequence to this useless fact. And so our brains would be like, we'd be much more clear-minded if that was true. For better or worse, I think we remember a bunch of random stuff too. Avril, you got one?
Sensory.
Say it again. Sensory. What would that fall under? Sensory. I'm going to put, you know that one now. Concrete, I think, connects to sensory a little bit. It's like something touchable, tangible. I skied fresh powder. It's like if you've ever skied, especially if you've had that experience, even if you haven't, chances are in this group you've seen snow. It's possible that you haven't, but chances are you've seen and felt snow. And so there's something tangible about that. Whereas if I'm just talking to you about love, it's like, it's abstract. I can't touch it, hold it, etc.
Challenging.
Challenging. I think challenging information is memorable if it comes from a credible source. So the one that I just revealed, credible here is like, if I tell you, that 75% of people forget 25% of what is said in a meeting, But if I tell you that Harvard researcher paired up with a Yale researcher and studied 40,000 people and found that 75% of them forgot what 25% of the material was, right? It's like that credibility makes you tune in. Your brain is like, oh, maybe I should pay attention to this because the probability of it being true is higher than some random person saying some random thing.
Specific.
Ooh, okay. So this is a bonus. If I Chip and Dan Heath let me write an extra chapter of their book, I would add specificity to the end of it. And pulling a John Hodgman quote: "Specificity is the soul of narrative." Right. So if I tell you to just remember that when I was younger, I used to drive a Jeep, you're unlikely to remember that. But if I tell you that it was a red Jeep and I used to drive it through dirt roads up the mountain, and so it had a bunch of mud on the flaps in the back, it's more information, it's more content, it's more words, but your brain is actually more likely to remember it. Because that specific gives us lots of anchors to hold on. And then the final S, simple, which this is an awfully long acronym, ironically, to have the last one revealed being simple. But it's like, oh man, if an idea is too complex, I kind of lose it. So what I'd like to do to practice this a little bit, to increase the chances that you remember some of this, is we're going to put this one into practice, specificity in particular. The idea, first of all, is if you take content and you turn these into a series of check boxes and you run your material through that and you say, well, it's simple. It's not really unexpected. This is like kind of usual information. Half the group might have heard this already. Okay, can't check that one. It's concrete though. I've got some like really lovely stories that make this really concrete. It's visual, right? So it's a lovely checkbox. Specificity, what I'd love for you to do as a way to design content for contribution, rather than me say anything else to help you remember it, I would love you to leave Zoom, open Google, and Google Chip and Dan Heath and spend the next, I'm going to put up a 1 minute timer, spend the next 1 minute trying to learn a weird fact about them. So whatever you need to do to search on Google, search Chip and Dan Heath, authors of Made to Stick, find some weird fact, ideally little known or not real obvious, not in their main bio. See if you can find a random little fact. You've got 1 minute, and then I'm going to ask you to come back and share that fact with the group. I'm going to add an element. The first person to unmute and share a fact about Chip and Dan Heath wins bonus pride. I have my little known fact. Based on 9 people Googling and ChatGPTing about well-known best-selling authors, is that they ironically live a not particularly public life. Only standard information is available. Did anybody find anything? I'll give one more chance.
I mean, other than like he did this episode with Dax Shepard.
I think that's a little known fact. So
in one picture, they share similar haircuts.
Oh, I like it, Ian. They are brothers after all. Here's the idea. When you invite contribution, I like oftentimes, as the facilitator, teacher, educator, I like to invite some sort of participation where I don't actually have the answer. I don't know. I can't solve it. And the reason is we've entered the land of unknown. And so we've pushed into the land of unexpected, of like, I don't really know the outcome. Now, that said, this assignment was a little ridiculous as we're live filming a YouTube video. If I asked a private investigator to go find a little known fact about Naya or Lisa, and I said, you'll have 1 minute, they'd probably be like, sorry, I can't do that, and turn down the job. And so if I gave you 10 minutes, I bet we might be able to come up with some more things. But the idea is, right, leading people into the land of unknown is brain friendly. It's really good for our brains to enter a space where we don't know what's going to happen. We were talking right before we started filming this, Lisa, whose work focuses around the power of storytelling. We were discussing, why do people actually physically lean in when you start to tell a story? And I wonder, I think there's probably lots of reasons, but I wonder, and I don't know, but I wonder if one of the reasons is because it creates a knowledge gap of like, there's a sequence of events. It's probably going to lead to some punchline or something. And I want to know what's going to happen next so I don't miss it. It creates this like fear of missing out in us, this curiosity gap, which is something that Chip and Dan Heath talk about in their book, Made to Stick. Whew. Hope this was useful for you. Have an awesome day.